Dharma in Buddhism and Logos in Christianity are two fundamental concepts that deeply characterize their respective spiritual traditions. In this video, we will try to grasp their essence and extract at least two useful teachings to experiment with in our daily lives. The term dharma in Sanskrit means natural law of existence. It comes from the root dhr, which we can translate as foundation of reality. Therefore, dharma is that universal principle that regulates the existence of everything that exists, including the human being. Understanding its essence and putting it into practice means living in harmony with the entire universe, dancing to the same music, to use a metaphor, that resonates throughout reality. Gautama Buddha also taught that living according to Dharma leads to liberation from the cycle of samsara, the endless wheel of births and deaths. I'll leave you a video in the description where I talk about it. Let us now read a passage from the Dhammapada, which reports the first words spoken by the Buddha after reaching enlightenment.
For countless lives I have wandered, seeking in vain the builder of the house of my suffering. But now I have found you, builder of nothing from today on. Your boards have been removed, and your ridge beam has been broken. Desire is all extinguished. My heart united with the uncreated.
The builder, in the text, represents our ego, while the house is our mind inhabited by suffering. With enlightenment, we free ourselves from identification with the ego and stop considering as real what is not real, the illusions of our ego that are the cause of suffering. The vision of the essential dimension of reality becomes so clear that one experiences a sort of unification with the Dharma, the principle that regulates all existence, always and forever. After having lived this experience of awakening, Gautama Buddha, in his immense wisdom and compassion, wanted to share the principles of Dharma with his disciples, so that we could all have the same experience and lead an authentic life, in harmony with everything that surrounds us. These principles are found, in particular, in the Fourth Noble Truth, which contains the Eightfold Path, the main teaching of Buddhism. There are 8 branches that flow into it, namely, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. The Eightfold Path is the very essence of Dharma, which in fact is represented as the wheel of an 8-spoked chariot, which continues to turn, spreading these universal principles more and more. In ancient times, before the iconic representation of statues and other images of the Buddha was introduced, it was the wheel of Dharma that was the object of veneration. Today, this wheel is the international symbol of Buddhism and is common to all the various traditions. Why was the wheel symbol chosen? To say that the elements of the Eightfold Path are not to be practiced in a linear progression, one at a time, but, just like the spokes of a wheel, they are all, at the same time, fundamental for the wheel to turn well, following a straight line. In fact, much emphasis is placed on the rectitude that characterizes each element and which, taken together, leads to the cessation of suffering. In this video, we do not have time to explain the Eightfold Path in detail. This is not even our purpose. Let it suffice to know that the principles that constitute it and that form the Dharma are not abstract concepts, but are practical indications to be exercised in real life so that it harmonizes with the entire universe, finally free from the illusions of our mind, and consequently from suffering. If what you've heard so far has piqued your interest, let me know with a like, or write it to me in the comments. Just as Dharma can be considered the foundation of reality and the natural law of existence, in the same way, in Christianity, the Logos is considered the principle of everything. Even the Logos is God Himself. Let us read the first 3 verses of the Gospel of John, where the Greek word logos is translated as word.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made.
In other editions of the Gospel, the term logos is translated as verb. In any case, both verb and word imply communication. The term verb, moreover, also presupposes an action. The verb, in fact, is a word that describes an action. Therefore, this logos is a communication that translates into action and which is found with God, indeed, who is God himself. It is also said that everything that exists was made through this logos. Interesting to note, that was in the beginning. Given the use of the verb to be in the past tense, it probably existed even before the beginning, as if it had always existed. Furthermore, the ancient Greek term, which we translate as beginning, is arche. For the ancient Greeks, the arche represents the primordial force that dominates the world, from which everything comes and to which everything will return. Therefore, beginning is not to be understood in a chronological sense, at the beginning, but rather in the sense of archetype as a principle that orders everything. One cannot help but notice the affinity with the words of the Buddha when he speaks of the uncreated and of the possibility of liberation from suffering.
Since instead there is an unborn, unevolved, unmade, unconditioned. A way out can be seen from the born, evolved, made, conditioned.
Therefore, for both spiritual traditions, there is a principle that has always existed, not subject to change, which regulates all reality, which human beings can access to live fully, free from suffering. Now, moving forward in the reading of the Gospel of John, in verse 14, we read,
And the Word became flesh, and made his dwelling among us. And we have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth.
What does it mean that the Logos becomes flesh? It means that this verb, this word which is the universal principle of all that exists, is fully assimilated and realized in the concrete life of a man who lived about 2,000 years ago, named Jesus of Nazareth. The Logos is no longer an abstract principle, but in Jesus it becomes concrete action, in his flesh. Jesus, in his humanity, lived the Logos to the full, which at this point becomes visible to all. Consequently, we too, looking at Jesus, the only begotten Son, and his entire life narrated in the Gospels, are generated as children of this Logos, and can also assimilate it into our lives. From this last aspect of the Logos becoming flesh, we can derive two fundamental elements. 1. Christianity is not something disembodied, abstract, that despises our condition as human beings with our desires, needs, and limits. Indeed, our very flesh is the sphere where we live the revelation of God himself. 2. By frequenting and entering into a relationship with the word of the gospel, which shows us the Logos incarnate in Jesus Christ, we too can follow the same path to become like God. God became flesh, and we, in the flesh, become like God through listening to that flesh that is narrated in the gospel. In short, Christianity is the principle of the divinization of man. In fact, in verse 12 we read,
Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God.
Even in these two elements, which characterize the very essence of Christianity, we can find resonances with Buddhism. In the Buddhist vision, in fact, birth in a human body is considered precious because it offers the opportunity to evolve towards complete enlightenment. In fact, human beings can live in full awareness according to the principles of Dharma, and thus realize the Buddha nature that is already potentially within them. So even in Buddhism, meat, which represents the human condition, certainly has a positive value. Furthermore, although Buddhism does not place much importance on words to express the essence of enlightenment, which remains fundamentally indescribable, it cannot help but use them to convey the principles of the Dharma. Fundamental, in fact, is the disciple-master relationship, within which each word is not just a label that defines a content. The word you don't see. The word must be understood and lived in the relationship. Man becomes the word he listens to. In this sense, in Buddhism as in Christianity, precisely through the concretely lived word that derives from having internalized the Dharma, one can come to embody that state of liberation that we can call enlightenment or nirvana. As promised at the beginning of the video, the first lesson we can learn from the comparison between Dharma and Logos is that in our spiritual path, whatever it may be, it is important to rely on a carefully chosen guide, or, in the absence of this possibility, on a universally recognized text from which we can internalize the fundamental principles. To give an example, in relation to Christianity, we can rely on the 4 canonical Gospels. While in Buddhism, we could read the Dhammapada, which means precisely the path of Dharma. It is important to rely on an authoritative guide, whether a person or a text, to avoid building a false spirituality, the fruit of an illusion of our ego. The second teaching is that both spiritual traditions place as the foundation of everything not chaos or chance, not destiny or necessity, but rather a principle that is the source of wisdom, freedom, communication, compassion, and love. And from physics, we know that what is in the principle manifests itself in everything that derives from that principle. This means that man too can choose to be wisdom, freedom, communication, compassion, and love. It depends on which word you decide to listen to. If this video has given you some useful ideas for your spiritual journey, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. You will help us to continue offering you interesting reflections that come from the comparison between Christianity and Buddhism. In this regard, I also invite you to watch this video that talks about the resurrection of Jesus in the light of the doctrine of the 3 bodies of the Buddha, trying to reveal its most authentic meaning. Namaste, and God bless you.